Hi, I'm Victoria Pearson, but you can call me V, and I know I did promise you another witchy video this week, but I ended up spontaneously making a little terrarium this weekend to keep Dave here company. You see, the steps in Dave had collapsed because the plants in there had got far too overcrowded, and so I gave them a good prune out, but when I was doing that, I noticed that one of these plants already had some little air roots in there. So I thought if I keep them nice and moist and make the new terrarium quick enough so that we don't lose any of the humidity levels, I might be able to make his own little house for him. You might be able to see some of the roots here. I wasn't sure if they were going to take because they were air roots and I've planted them into the soil, but I'm a few days in now and it seems to be doing okay. I did trim the roots a little bit smaller just to make it so that the plant would be nice and stable, and I cut the lower leaves off as well, again to make the plant more stable so that I could bury it a little bit deeper in the ground. And so it ended up just like that. Not very visible there, I'm afraid, but there are some roots on there. So the first thing that I did once I'd got my clean jar all ready to go was get some of these little drainage pebbles that I got for the last terrarium. Didn't really need very much of them. I'd bought some extras because the kit that I used to make Dave was a little bit low on them, and then I didn't end up using them, so I'm glad that I got some that I can use today. I also got some of this, I think you call it sphagnum moss. It came with my original kit. It looks very dried up and dead, but I'm told that if you soak it in some water, it comes back to life again. It's supposed to be good for the soil as well as being a good growing medium. I'm not sure if it will take and turn green, but I'm soaking it there to give it a little addition to my terrarium. So the drainage beads went in, and I did put quite a lot of them in there to just give lots and lots of room for the roots to escape from the water so that we don't get root rot with the plants, which is an issue that I do have with a lot of my pot plants, especially if they don't have drainage holes in them. This is going to be a closed terrarium, so I need that to be plenty of drainage room in there for it so that it doesn't get too wet. As you can see, after I put those drainage beads in, I just give them a little pat down, and then I got some of this mesh which I used in my other terrarium as well, just to separate the drainage layer from the substrate layer so that all of the little soil doesn't just wash down to the bottom of the drainage beads there. I cut it roughly to the right sort of size, but it doesn't have to be perfect because it's all going to be buried anyway. The next layer going in is some activated charcoal that both nourishes the soil and it gives you an extra drainage layer, but it also stops fungal growth and things like that. I'm using a horticultural charcoal here, but I think there are other types of activated charcoal that you can use that are just as good. After my charcoal's gone in, I just put my little mesh layer in there and just gently pat everything down. I'm not trying to compact it here, I'm just trying to make sure that all the layers even and smooth so that I've got a nice even surface to work with when I put the substrate in. And that substrate is going in now. I am just using houseplant compost, potting compost, but I am assuming that you can use pretty much any kind of compost, or if you've got special fancy plants that are fussy about the soil that they go in, you might want to buy soil that is specifically for that type of plant. Again, when I'm patting it down here, I'm not trying to compact it, I'm just trying to make it so that the layer is even and straight at the top. My last terrarium that I made was actually on a slope, but this one I want it to be a nice straight one. I'm not putting any steps or anything in it, and so I want that horizon line to be nice and level there. Next, I'm putting my hardscaping in. This is a big pebble that has been in my son's collection for a long time. In fact, when he was doing Stone Age at school, he burnt a match and drew on this a little stick figure with his burnt match to be a charcoal painting like the cavemen used to do. And so I'm trying to position this in such a way that you'll be able to see that from the outside, because that was the only way that I was allowed to use his stone. And then when I've got it in place, I'm just tapping the soil that I put in around it to make it a little bit more stable in there. I do apologise for the camera angle here, it was not ideal. I'm taking some little bits of that soil and I'm just backfilling around the rock so that it's nice and stable in the soil without me having to compact it too hard. Next, I'm taking a handful of gravel just out of my front garden. It's in a sieve because I washed it with soapy water and then rinsed it out with boiling water to prevent any bacteria from getting into the terrarium and growing into mould or moss or something yucky. So I've just got a small handful of stones there, and I'm using them to sort of naturalise it around the stone. I've put in a tiny little craft mirror, and I think I forgot to show that to the camera. And so I am just naturalising around that so that hopefully it will look like a little mountain lake or pond there next to my big giant stone. Now it's time for my little plant to go in. I am just gently making a hole for those little air roots to go on, laying it on top of the soil, being as gentle as I possibly can be with it. I'm taking my little cork on a stick there and making a tiny little hole for him to go in. As you can see from the dirt on the stick, it's not very deep because this plant, like I say, can grow air roots, and so it doesn't need to be rooted too deep into the soil. But I want it to be deep enough that it's going to support the plant in there. And so I decided that I was going to plant it behind the stone and have it creep round to the front. And I was actually quite pleased with how it was once it had got into position. I took some more soil and just sprinkled it on top of those roots rather than trying to push them down into the existing soil and risking damaging those roots some more. Once my plant and my main big stone was situated, it was time to sort of put all the tiny little things in here. I'm taking the cover off of the mirror because I forgot to do that before, popping it back in the soil, and then I just gently bring the edges of the soil over it, just around the edges so that it gives it a more natural border. And then I put some of those tiny bits of gravel on top of there and around it to make it look sort of more naturalized in. Obviously it doesn't look 100% natural because it is in fact a mirror and not water, but from a maintenance perspective that's going to work a lot better, and it should also help bounce some light around into the more difficult to reach places within the terrarium so that when the plant starts growing bigger it won't be crowding itself out too badly. Once I was happy with the positioning, I gave it a little spray with water, not too much because I don't want it to get too saturated, but just enough to hold that soil in place. And then I cleaned the water excess off of the glass so that it wouldn't get too damp inside there. Quite a lot of fiddling and poking later, I started to get happy with how it looks. I'm not sure that you can see it very well though. It's difficult to film a terrarium because the light bounces off the glass and makes it really hard to see. I did put in a couple of little finishing touches, or just little bits of gravel to make it look natural. I really didn't want too many things inside this terrarium. My other one's got a T-Rex skull and a staircase and all sorts of things, so I wanted to keep this one quite simple and use mostly just natural things that I had about the place, rather than making man-made looking structures or adding in little plastic toys and things like that, like I do sometimes. It's coming together quite well, and I almost left it like this because I didn't want it to be too crowded out, but I decided it was missing something and it needed some sort of visual interest in the top, a bit of height to the design, and so I went into my garden and found myself a stick. Before I could add the stick though, I wanted to make sure that every little tiny bit was perfect, so I took my tiny little stones with my tweezers and just placed the last few in there. I didn't want any of the edge of that mirror showing, I just wanted it to be a little reflective area in there, and I wanted to make extra sure that you could see the little Stone Age carving on my rock. You can see it in real life, but you do have to kind of know it's there. It isn't as visible as I would have liked, and I probably should have gone over it with a black Sharpie or something like that to make it a bit more visible, but hey, then it wouldn't have been quite as authentic. I added some more of the sphagnum moss into the base layer. It is soaked in the water, so it should hold some water in there to release if things inside get too dry. It also works as a soil conditioner. I have been told that it can cause green moss to grow, which would be fantastic, but I can't imagine it happening. I would have liked to have added some moss to this terrarium, but I didn't have any that I had cultivated, and I didn't want to risk just scraping some up out of the garden and making the whole terrarium go mouldy, because that has happened to me in the past, and it was very disheartening to get up one morning and just find an entire jar of mould. Once I'd added in all those tiny little bits of moss and got it all just exactly how I wanted it, it was time to add in the stick. I didn't sort of shape it or anything, I just found a random stick and cut it down probably using kitchen scissors wasn't the best idea. Maybe I should have used garden shears or something like that, but never mind, we were in the moment. And so I just cut it down until I was confident that it could fit in the jar. And I pulled off all the little bits of cobwebs and stuff because I didn't want to bring in any little buggy visitors. I don't think there'd be enough food for them in the jar. And then I just sort of rammed it in, really. I measured it in to make sure that it would fit. I broke the end off to give it a more natural sort of look than a cut end. And I just shoved it until it could get into this little hole. Yes, I was a little bit concerned that there was going to be a moment where I was going to knock the whole thing flying and just cover my entire living room in a mixture of mud and stones and bits of charcoal, but it didn't. The branch came in quite nicely. And then to naturalise it a little bit more, I decided to add some little bits of moss just hanging off those branches. It would be awesome if it does turn green and make that look like a living little tree again, but I don't think it's gonna. But I think it will still have a really cool effect either way. It'll have that kind of swampy horror movie type vibe with the Spanish moss hanging from the trees. Oh, that's what I was going for anyway. And you know, it hasn't fallen off yet, so that's something. And just like that, my little coffee terrarium was done. I put the lid back on and declared that it was finished. I wish that you could see a little bit better. Like I said, the light isn't ideal to show you this terrarium, but I'm really, really pleased with how it came out. And here it is with Dave in his full glory there, just relaxing next to my salt lamp. This new terrarium needs a name though, because otherwise I will forget it exists. And so please help me name my terrarium. It's a very cute little and friendly one, and it does desperately need a name. Maybe on future Terrarium Tuesdays we can check in and see if I've killed this guy yet either. It's got a very different vibe to Dave, but I really, really like it. I think the next challenge will be to make one that's even smaller. And yeah, my plant does look very sad there, but it perked up a few days later. It was just a bit of transplant shock. Join me on Monday for my next vlog. I'm going to be talking to you all about my 30-day September glow up challenge, how that went for me, and we're going to talk a little bit about goal setting in general. I'm also going to be talking about winter and the stuff that we're going to be doing over autumn and winter, because I can feel it coming now. We're getting into spooky season. That makes me so happy. If you can't wait till Monday to see me again, I understand. I'm pretty awesome like that. You can join me every morning in your shorts, taking a great big deep breath, letting you know what I'm grateful for. I love when you join in with that. We get our day started on the right note together every single morning. I'm usually here on a Tuesday as well, letting you know whether or not I have killed Dave the terrarium yet. We might be letting this little terrarium join in too, if you guys can come up with a name for him. And I'm generally here on a Wednesday as well, doing a Witchy Wednesday intuitive card reading for you. So there's just no getting rid of me really. Until then, you have yourself a magical week.